Hi, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Impact Career Series podcast from the Marshall Institute here at the London School of Economics. We're so glad to have you guys back. As many of you know, my name is Carlos Miranda, and I am an entrepreneur, a social entrepreneur with a few businesses under his belt. I'm also very lucky enough to be a practitioner in residence at the Marshall Institute here at LSE. Now, the Impact Career Series has been all about exploring how people build purpose-led careers, often across many sectors and often in very non-linear ways. Over the course of this season of the series, we've spoken with leaders from global nonprofits, corporate sustainability, philanthropy, sport, and today we're speaking to somebody who works in the charity sector. Well, this is our final episode for this season. We hope that these conversations continue to inspire you and provide you with practical insights and advice for your own career journey. Now, in a second, we're going to welcome Richard Bryars, who is the Director of Strategy and Implementation at Action for Children. Richard has led strategy and new business development at some of the UK's most iconic organizations, including the Co-op and John Lewis Partnerships. He's passionate about exploring how socially focused organizations manage the tensions between profit and purpose, and has helped shape strategies to balance both. Today at Action for Children, he leads the teams working on strategy, impact, business planning, and improvement. Doing all of that really to drive forward the organization's mission to improve the lives of children across the UK. He also serves on the Board of Trustees of the New Economics Foundation. So without further ado, let's welcome Richard to the show.
Hi, Carlos.
Hi, Richard. How you doing, buddy?
Very good. Very good. How are you?
Very good. Where are you calling in from, by the way?
So I live just outside Manchester, just on the edge of the Peak District. So a lovely part of the world, actually, where today it's not actually raining, which is quite unusual for this little corner of the country.
Well, as our listeners know, I live in Edinburgh, and today is also not raining. So we're off to a great start, dude.
Excellent.
So before we dive in, obviously you've worked at some amazing, huge brands that almost everybody in the country knows, Co-op, John Lewis. But you're currently, your current gig and what we're here to talk about really is Action for Children. For those of them, for those listeners of ours that don't know Action for Children, give us a sense of who you are and what you do to kind of set the scene, please.
Yeah. So Action for Children, it's actually one of the UK's biggest children's charities. Mm-hmm. And we're a sort of frontline service delivery organisation. So we operate children's social care services right across the 4 nations of the UK. A whole mix of different things, from running children's residential care homes, fostering services, family support, mental health, all sorts of things to help children and families, with an aim of making sure that essentially that every child in the UK has a great start in life and has the opportunity to achieve.
That talk about it like a worthwhile and amazing mission. How long have you been there?
So I've been here 3 years.
Right.
Just over 3 years.
Right, and where were you at immediately before?
So my last role before that was in the Co-op group,
right.
But I actually had a couple of years out through the COVID pandemic, which we may come back to in sort of turning points in the career. But I was very fortunate with young children to be able to take a little bit of time out and actually to do the social entrepreneurship masters at LSE, which is was quite a critical sort of shifting point in my direction.
Well, that's fabulous to hear, because obviously, many of our listeners, obviously it's an LSE podcast. We're very proud of the work that we do at Marshall Institute. And while we've had a variety of different people who haven't gone through our programs on the show, because obviously we want to give a breadth of experiences and different, and have a breadth of different guests. It's always so nice when we get to talk to an LSE alumni. I also went to LSE, but I won't tell you when, because it was like a long time ago. The Marshall Institute didn't even exist. Let's go back and let's talk about your career and kind of what's led you to where you are right now. I kind of want to go back a little bit. You've built a career really, for the most part, at the intersection of business strategy and social purpose, right? Looking back, what kind of first drew you into purpose-led work?
I will be completely honest, Carlos, and say it was more by luck than by design, really.
Yeah.
So I started out, my very first sort of roles were in strategy consulting.
Right.
And I mean, strategy consulting is an incredible grounding, I think, for any career in terms of giving you a toolkit and a skill set to apply in a variety of ways. But for me, it was a little bit unfulfilling, that kind of dropping into organizations, solving a problem. It's mentally stimulating, but you're never there to see the outcomes and what you actually deliver. Yeah. So I left strategy consulting, and as I say, more by luck than design, landed in John Lewis partnership. It was a role that appealed to me more than the organization. But
and what was that role at John Lewis?
So my very first role there was new business development, actually. So John Lewis at the time was looking to, they run John Lewis department stores and Waitrose supermarkets, and they were looking to think what else can we add to that stable of brands and that stable of businesses. So I worked quite heavily on what became the sort of John Lewis Financial Services business, but at the time we were exploring a variety of different options. Right. But through that, I ended up in a role where I was working for Charlie Mayfield, who was the then exec chair, effectively the CEO of the partnership, and working with Charlie very closely on reinventing the strategy for the partnership, which in effect at the time actually was really trying to rethink what does employee ownership mean in the 21st century. And that really was when I first sort of engaged with this notion of different ways of doing business. And as John Lewis called it, a better way of doing business. Yeah. And really through and Charlie's an incredibly inspiring guy. Through exploring that with him, actually when you start to dig into some of the data and some of the insight around mutuals and other organizations like that, it's quite compelling. They are very powerful ways of doing business. They have a whole host of strengths. They have some challenges as well. But looking at that and looking at how the organization operated, I kind of a strong sense that this is a more forward-thinking, more broadly beneficial way of operating than a sort of pure shareholder capitalism model.
Yeah. And how long were you at John Lewis?
So I was at John Lewis for about 10 years.
Right. And from John Lewis, you went straight into the co-op?
No, I actually was. I had a sort of career aberration where so I spent about 5 years at Asda, who at that point were owned by Walmart.
Right.
So from sort of mutual business in John Lewis to sort of super capitalism in the Walmart empire. Yeah. But all sorts of largely family reasons actually as to how that move came about. But again, in a sense, it reinforced my belief in a different way of operating. Because I think when you stepping into that model of actually really quite short-term, very profit-driven business, and some of the decision making that it drives, and the narrow focus that it has on outcomes, I personally found very unfulfilling. Yeah.
Well, let's drill on that a little bit, because that's really interesting. How did that John Lewis kind of better way of doing business, and we're not sponsored by John Lewis or anything, but that better way of doing business, how did that model influence the way you think purpose should be embedded into capitalist enterprises?
I think there are a few things that are important. I mean, as much as anything, it's a broader view of who your stakeholders are. So, in John Lewis, obviously it is employee owned, and therefore the employees are a crucial group. But actually, because you're engaging with in John Lewis, 80,000 employees who also have a broad sense of what they want their business to achieve, and recognizing that it is their business, not sort of senior management's business. You automatically have to start to reflect a wider range of perspectives as you make decisions. There's also, I think, a lot in that business model that encourages a long-term thinking. So you are, and this plays into the charity sector as well. You are custodians of an organization. You are not the owners of an organization, and you have it's actually written into the Constitution of John Lewis that you need to be thinking intergenerationally, not just about the employee base that you have right now, but also the ones that will come after that. So you can take decisions with a different time frame, and again, contrasting that with the Asda experience, you end up with very different decisions being made.
Yeah. No, I can totally see that. And so going back to your career, so you've done John Lewis for a while. You go to ASDA, and then you go to Co-op again, like three massive, I dare I say, iconic British brands, right?
Yeah,
And
and so Co-op was. Sorry, go on, Carlos.
No, sorry. There's a bit delay. Like, tell us about Co-op.
Yeah, so Co-op, I suppose, was a very conscious decision to try and return to those roots of mutual sort of stakeholder capitalism, and again, a really interesting role when I first moved there, which was again actually the Co-op group trying to ask a very similar question to the one that we'd answered at John Lewis, which was what does a co-op mean in the 21st century, and what does cooperation mean in the 21st century? And an interesting experience there, because I think what I took from that was the importance of intent and motivation in the leadership of an organization. Whilst I was there, there was a shift in leadership, and actually an organization that despite having a business model that gives them the opportunity to really operate in a very different way, actually a team of senior leaders who really wanted to operate rather, in a very similar way to other retailers. So it was a kind of a model that said, well, look, let's try and maximize the profit, but then run a more generous CSR program off the back of it.
Yeah.
And I think that actually that motivation and that intent means that they really weren't fulfilling the true potential of that model, which requires really you to recognize that you are a customer-owned organization, and being customer-owned in the way that John Lewis has managed to do successfully with his employees, you need to give power out to those customers. You need to give them influence in the way the organization is run for the model to have any meaning. If all you actually do is maximize your profit and try and distribute a little bit from a consumer's perspective, and your consumers are your owners, you're not really very different to Tesco with a reward scheme.
Right.
And so actually, I sort of, again, in that sort of arc of a career journey, I got frustrated with an organization that felt like it had potential but wasn't fulfilling that potential.
Yeah. And then you decide, and one of the things that's amazing about all of these interviews, and also about my career, and that a lot of us working in this space, or whatever corner of the space it may be, is that these careers, as I said during the intro, we always say to people, they're, for the most part, they're so not linear, right? It's you kind of bounce around, and then you kind of find your way, and there isn't like an A leads to B leads to C sort of roadmap. And one of the things that we find is that a lot of our students, a lot of people who are kind of coming through the Marshall Institute, coming through LSE, are individuals who are at certain points of their career, and they're like, well, I want to hit the brakes and potentially go in a different direction. Is that what happened to you? And tell us about, kind of in a minute, tell us about your experience here at LSE.
Yeah, a little bit. So we hit the pandemic in 2020, and actually I was made redundant from Co-op Group.
Yeah.
I think it's quite important that I say that, because there's often a bit of shame, I think, around being made redundant from organisations. But for me, it was, it really was actually the nudge I needed. I was very fortunate. My wife's a doctor, and therefore we sort of hit the pandemic with young children. Her work, understandably, went pretty crazy. Yeah. So I was able to take a little bit of time off, and being in a fortunate position to be able to do that, look after the children, and then thought, well, I've got got some time on my hands. Do you know what? I'd love to go back to university and do a master's. And the exec masters at LSE in social business entrepreneurship is an incredibly unique course, and just hit all the right notes for some of the things that really interest me, and this sort of hunger I'd had for a few years to explore some things that I felt like I didn't quite understand but wanted to, and the course was sitting there and sort of ready and waiting. So I did that, and that cemented this sense to me. Well, actually, I mean, it opened my eyes up, I suppose, to the broader ecosystem of different organizations that are operating in the kind of purpose space, and some of the different dynamics of that. And I guess as a strategist, I think, as you said in your intro, I've always been fascinated by how you address some of the challenges that you hit when you're spanning that sort of profit and purpose divide.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know what, I've seen some of that. I've seen the uber capitalist end of that with Walmart. I've seen sort of the softer capitalist sense end of that through John Lewis and through Co-op Group. I'd actually spent a little bit of time as a trustee of a small children's charity, and actually thought, you know what, actually I would really like to go and see how this feels in the charitable sector, and whether that experience is different.
No, that's amazing. And how did you think, going back a second to the program, and just getting your master's in general, how do you think that prepared you for, like, you know, some of the challenges that that not just, you know, you're facing today as an organization, but really that the sector is facing today?
That's an interesting question. I mean, I look back on the course and think back to the course quite frequently in the role. You know, we spend quite a lot of time, as I say, sort of thinking of some of the practice and theory of the challenges that organizations face when they've got this sort of twin pull, profit and purpose. And you know, we absolutely feel that as an organization, and I absolutely feel that as a decision maker in the organization. And as well as a little bit of understanding, there's a sort of reassurance in a way of knowing, well, like, these problems are common, these problems are faced by many organizations, and there are ways to unpick and think through those. I think there are a whole host of specific modules that I've lent on a lot. I managed our impact function, and that sort of broad understanding of impact measurement, different approaches to impact measurement is has sort of stood me in good stead for that. The leadership module, actually, I found to be hugely beneficial. And some of that thinking around how you manage and how you lead in different organizations in different contexts. I've ended up now sort of running a little training course on leadership in the organization, and I shamelessly stolen half the materials to sort of pass on.
Yeah.
So a whole lot of that is beneficial, I think, from a sector perspective. Again, you know, an understanding of that ecosystem and the different types of hybrid organizations and how they operate and different challenges they face is sort of helpful as a broad backdrop. And an understanding of impact capital and impact investing is something that I'm starting to try and nudge into our organization. I think, you know, Action for Children, like I suspect many charities, they're very traditional in mindset, quite risk averse in mindset, and I think are being slow on the uptake of some of the new opportunities that can, you know, that impact investing can unlock, and that's something that I'm just trying to sort of gently nudge some of my fellow leaders into thinking about. So yeah, I mean, a whole host of different things at different levels that have been really valuable.
I mean, that's great to hear. It's always nice to hear when, you know, not just our program, but when anyone invests time, energy, and money to go do something like that, really, like, invest in themselves, when it really kind of pays off. And it sounds like in your case, it really has. You know, you've talked a little bit about, and you've alluded to just now, about how you make Action for Children think differently, strategically, what else you could be doing. You know, obviously the charity sector, the third sector, is facing some really unprecedented headwinds. I do a lot of work, you know, for my sins, when I'm not a practitioner in residence at the Marshall Institute, I founded a management consultancy that works exclusively in the social and environmental space, right? So we see this a lot. How do you see the role of charities and socially focused organizations evolving over the coming, you know, let's say few years, decade here in the UK, given like the headwinds? How, and another way of maybe tackling that, like, how does someone like you in your day-to-day role look at the headwinds and the challenges and say, look, we need to be more dynamic, we need to be more strategic and tactical in how we approach because of this? Tell us, I'd love to hear a little bit more about that.
That's a very interesting question. I mean, I think there's a host of ways you could answer that. So I've just come back actually from the Labour Party conference. We're there as an organisation, you know, sort of making our pitch for various things that we want to see happen in the children's social care environment. Oh, hang on, sorry, I've just lost your. There we go. And I think, you know, what's very clear from that experience is that charities have a huge role to play in shaping the government's thinking about the way the country evolves and develops. It's a fascinating contrast, actually, when I think of the relative scale of organisations like John Lewis as the Co-op Group. compared to Action for Children, which, big charity, but we turn over about £175 million a year, so tiny in comparison. And yet we've spent 3 or 4 days, sitting alongside ministers and MPs and debating the issues that are critical to the country right now. You have incredible access and influence in helping to shape government policy, and therefore to deliver systems change in whatever environment you're operating within. So that I think is really important. I think that there are a whole bunch of challenges that the sector is facing, as you say, a whole bunch of headwinds. I have a personal view that that a lot of charities are too small, subscale. There are interesting theories about the dynamics of the sector and why that is, but I suspect there is consolidation that is likely to start to happen, and that over time we'll see sort of fewer larger charities emerging, and various sort of efficiencies that can come from that. I guess what you're going to think that is how you do that in a way that you don't lose sight of the purpose of the organisation and the ultimate goals of the organisation.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent answer. And conscious of time, obviously impact this entire series really is also to kind of learn from people such as you, Richard, about like their careers and to be inspired. If you could leave the interview with kind of like our participants with one kind of piece of advice, right? Maybe it's something that someone told you, maybe it's something that you wish you knew. What one piece of advice would you tell our listeners who are kind of interested, obviously, in socially driven and socially focused careers?
I would certainly echo the point that you made in your intro about careers not being linear, and for me, what's always guided me is working on the things that excite and inspire me, and trying to work with people who excite and inspire me, and then always thinking what can you learn from those people, what can you take away from those people. I've been very lucky to work with some incredible people through my career, and always try to think, well, what is it that they're doing that I would like to mirror and I would like to echo, and not worrying too much about where that might take me or what the next step will be, because I think, as you say, opportunities emerge in a way that's almost impossible to sort of plan. And then I would say, as I said earlier, if you get the opportunity to go back into education mid-career, I would leap at it. It's by far and away one of the best things I've ever done, and such a different experience second time round, sort of studying as a mature student rather than as an undergrad. And has certainly, as we've discussed, reshaped my life and my focus.
Yeah, that's awesome, and what a nice endorsement for education as a whole, but also specifically at the Marshall Institute. Why can you look at that?
Absolutely.
I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much. I feel like, as I said in my intro, this is our last episode, ideally, of this season, and I feel like we're going off on a high. So thank you so much for your time, for your dedication, and just also, for the work that you do. We're really grateful to have had you on the show. Absolute pleasure. Great talking to you, Carlos. All right, listen, take care of yourself, buddy. Thank you. Cheers. Bye. Crew, I want to say thank you very much to Richard one more time for kind of sharing his insights and for, ending and helping us end this season of the show again on a real high. To everyone who has joined us today, and, to everyone who has joined us across these last few months, thank you as well. This wouldn't exist without kind of your interest and your engagement and your listenership, and we're really grateful. Again, this has been the final episode of the season, and it's really been a privilege for me to kind of host and to talk to such a wide and amazing range of entrepreneurs and people really doing amazing things, and kind of, people who are really moving the needle on a variety of social and environmental issues. And we've been lucky enough to have them all on our show. Speaking of our shows, if you've missed any earlier episodes, you can catch them all on LinkedIn, YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And obviously, before we wrap, a few things here. One is that you can subscribe to our newsletter for all of our events, all of our research, and all of our thought leadership. Two, you can explore all of our programs at the Marshall Institute, including our executive MSc in social business and entrepreneurship. Three, learn all about our 100X Impact Accelerator, which is kind of our initiative to kind of really support and help scale social ventures that are there to kind of impact people's lives. And last but not least, you can also check out all of, like I said, check out all of the previous episodes of our Impact Career on our Impact Careers page. Also connect with us on LinkedIn. Again, follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. While this is the end of the season, hopefully it's not the end of the Impact Careers journey. Keep an eye out on the Marshall Institute website and our LinkedIn page for any and all updates. And I just want to thank you very much for following us, engaging with the show, and being with us for the last few months. Hopefully see you again soon. All right, take care. Bye.